as you probably know, is part of the Breaking Ground Festival. Of course, Breaking Ground, it being the new community-led housing hub for the Liverpool City region, which was launched on Saturday morning with great enthusiasm and support. The festival's been running all week since then. It goes on till Sunday. And I know it's been a massive, massive success with all sorts of really well-attended events. So huge congrats, Paul, for doing this.
Well done.
You know, absolutely, absolutely. I'm Peg Alexander, presenter and journalist and event host, and I'm very honoured to be hosting this event this afternoon because we are going to be talking about the really key and vital question: how can we stimulate more Black-led housing projects? The community-led housing sector is wonderful. I work in it as well as being a presenter, but it still has a long way to go before it's diverse and it's inclusive. So, on to your speakers today. Kim Johnson MP is the MP for Liverpool Riverside, and she's Liverpool's first Black woman MP. With a history of working in community development, she's a real supporter of community-led housing. Claude Hendrickson is on the call. Do you want to give us a wave, Claude? Say hello. Yeah, he's waving, he's waving. He's on silent, but he's waving. He's an Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion Advisor, and he's also a community-led housing advisor. He's actually been working in the community-led housing field for over 20 years, and he's going to be sharing his experience with us and talking about his current work to make the movement more diverse. We also have Henri Baptiste on the call as well. As Henri, have you come on? You've come on screen yet? No, Henri's still connecting to audio, but we'll know you're there, so we'll assume that you're kind of waving at us even though we can't see you there. Henri is the founder and director of Pathway Housing Solutions in Nottingham. They are committed to developing and managing and maintaining decent, affordable, quality homes in diverse communities. So let me run through the format for this event. Kim's going to say a few words for us, welcome us. Paul's also going to do a very brief introduction to Breaking Ground. And then we've got a short video to show you. This is when Kim, Paul and myself caught up previously to talk about this whole question for Liverpool, specifically Liverpool City region, and what we need to do. Then Claude's going to talk about his work over the last 20 years, and Henri's going to also follow in with a talk about Pathway Housing Solutions. And then Claude and Henri are going to introduce a project, a major national research project that they're currently developing. And then it's open to discussion for us all. And as I was saying, we really want to come out of this with some real clear ideas and suggestions about what Breaking Ground can be doing and how Breaking Ground can move forward. So from that, Paul, can I just hand over to you briefly to introduce Breaking Ground to anyone who doesn't know it?
Just in case you haven't heard, it's been a long week of talking, but Breaking Ground is the new community-led housing hub for the Liverpool City region. We were launched on Saturday. I came into post on April the 1st last year to set up the hub. And the idea about the hub is to support sharing information about what community-led housing can be. And there are lots and lots of different models out there, which we've been highlighting this week. So giving people the information they need. And then secondly, to build a pool of advisors who will be able to help develop more and more projects. And you know, Claude and Henri, we're hoping to have it add to our pool of advisors to work here in Liverpool, but also develop more skills in our region. So that's Breaking Ground, and it's great to have you here.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to say, please do use the chat throughout the session. I know I've been on other sessions in this festival, and the chat that goes alongside is really as good as what's been said on the screen. So please do use the chat. I'll be monitoring that as well, and I'll bring that into the conversation as much as we can. Kim, could I move to you? I know we're going to see our video in a sec, but if you could kind of like formally welcome everybody to this event and give a bit of that introduction from your perspective.
Thank you so much, Peg, and I'm really pleased to be part of this festival. And as Peg mentioned, I did do a video with her and Paul a couple of weeks ago because I was hoping to be on holiday, but nevertheless. But yeah, and I'm really, really pleased that we are focusing on Black-led housing initiatives because it's something that this city really needs, because historically there's been long-standing issues, as we know, in terms of racism in housing and allocation problems. And since we've had the large-scale stock transfer of housing to a myriad of housing associations, that hasn't changed. As a local MP, the bulk of my work, I would say, coming through caseload is around housing, poor quality housing, housing that's not fit for purpose, does not meet the family needs. So I think looking at this housing initiative has come at the right time. And I think if we're looking at Liverpool, and particularly Riverside and my constituency has some of the longest established diverse communities, and in terms of housing stock does not meet their needs. And so I think engaging with those groups in terms of looking at what could be available, I think would be very, very beneficial, because before I became an MP, I worked for over 20 years as a community development worker. I worked in the Dingle in the 1980s. It was the middle of a housing strategy called the Urban Regeneration Strategy, which was very much about pulling down poor quality housing and a lot of those tenement blocks that we had in the city. However, people were dispersed and people weren't happy about that. So housing co-ops started to be established and developed. So we do have a very strong history of community-led housing in the city. And I think looking at some of those initiatives will be beneficial to those groups that want to come forward, because I think, people can't do what they can't see. So if they have conversations with and see what's achievable, I think, will be, a long way going forward in terms of what could be achieved. The Housing People Building Communities project on Kingsley Road, the development of the church into housing, is a prime example of bringing people together, but not and improving people's housing and their communities, because I think what they've done in Kingsley Road is show what can be developed, in terms of a very diverse group of people coming together, building their own homes. Because at this moment in time, nationally, we have a major problem of affordable housing. We know that lots of young people are having to stay at home with their parents because they can't get on the housing ladder. We've got an issue in terms of the private sector and poor quality housing. So I think looking at the development of community-led housing, at this moment in time for our city is only going to be a really positive thing. And I really look forward to working with a range of groups and a range of individuals and breaking ground in terms of helping, bring that to fruition. And I look forward to seeing, a plethora of Black-led, community-led housing in the city being established. Thanks, Peg.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kim. Oh, there you go. If you want to put your mics up to clap, anybody, please do. So, Paul, are we able to launch the video?
Let's do this. Let's see if I could make this happen. Right.
Nice dog.
Nice. You don't want to hear about the dog, sorry. Can you see that?
Kim Johnson, MP for Liverpool Riverside. Paul Kelly, Director of Breaking Ground. Let's talk about Liverpool, about community-led housing and why there aren't any Black-led housing schemes in the city region and what needs to happen to address this. So, Kim, let me come to you first. Liverpool is kind of famous for having Europe's oldest Black community, and it's a real history of people-led housing and action too. Why do you think there aren't any Black-led housing schemes in the city at the moment?
I think a lot of that, Peg, would be down to lack of communication, a lack of understanding about how people would go about them. I think if people are provided with accurate and concise information, then people have an informed choice. But if they don't have the information, then it's very difficult to go down that route. And I'm a firm believer of people can become what they see. And if they don't see other Black-led organisations in the city, then they don't think it's possible or achievable. And it's about aspiration. And you just mentioned we do have the longest established black community across Europe, dating back hundreds of years. However, unfortunately, our black community is, very invisible right across the board. So housing is just one of those areas where there's a lack of representation.
Paul, talk to us a little bit about Breaking Ground, the hub, because in some ways what Kim's just said is exactly what Breaking Ground has started to do and is going to be doing.
Yeah, so Breaking Ground has been established to provide that information and real practical hands-on support with trained advisors. If a community group wants to explore the ideas of what a community-led housing scheme could be anywhere across our region. So it is about, firstly, really getting information out to people right at a grassroots level about the possibilities, and then having trained local people who can assist the journey for a group of people who might say, we want to look at a particular housing solution for our community, and we would help them do that.
And of course, in that, there's going to be specific plans for how you can get not just black schemes, but black-led schemes across Liverpool City, because that's so important, Kim, isn't it? That this isn't just about saying there is provision for everybody, that we've got to make sure that we have people from right across the community and people of colour in positions of authority and leadership.
I think that's quite right, because that is something that's sadly lacking in the city at the moment. And to provide those kinds of opportunities in terms of community-led housing, I think would be a major significant change and a bonus, to our city. We have demand for particular types of housing because of the demographics of
talk to us a bit about those specifics then for the city.
Well, we have some families that have large amounts of children, so we need houses that, have 4 and 5 bedrooms, and sadly, they're very scarce. We have an ageing population, diverse population, who would require things like, bungalows, and, there is scarcity in the community. Well, there is scarcity across the city, but, even more so within my constituency. And so having local people coming together to identify what's needed and required within each of their own communities is always going to be beneficial. When I worked as community development work in the 1980s, I worked with groups of tenants in terms of helping and supporting developing housing co-ops, and it gives them a great sense of ownership and control in terms of developing their home, but also developing and supporting their communities and each other.
I mean, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because you were out there doing that community development work. Some would say in a bit of a heyday in terms of community activity cooperatives in Liverpool.
I think you're quite right in terms of bit of a heyday, I suppose, in terms of community development, but kind of couched with, an economic downturn. The 80s were good. We had communities living together in tenement blocks in the Dingle, for example, families that lived together for generations. The council policy was a dispersal across the city, breaking up those communities. And people who lived in those tenement blocks, decided that that's not what they wanted to do. And so the spare for them was to come together and to develop their housing co-op. CDS was around at the time, gave lots of support to groups of local tenants to help and assist. I suppose some comparison to what Paul's talking about in terms of breaking ground. And so we had, clusters of housing co-ops, developed, particularly in South Liverpool, in the Dingle, because, people didn't want to be shifted and spread across the city. They wanted to retain their sense of community. And I think that's key to our city, very key. And I think that's something that could help and assist in terms of black-led housing, community-led housing going forwards. And I really hope that can happen, and I'm happy to support Paul in any way I can as the constituency MP to help that move along.
Is that one of the lessons, Paul, that in order for this to happen, you have to have that support, that help there?
Absolutely, and I think we're at an interesting time in Liverpool at the moment. There is a new energy, I think, to the politics in the city. There are new ideas coming through. There's new enthusiasm, and I see people like Kim. Obviously, I've worked with Kim in a community setting, who's got that grassroots experience, and then is bringing it to a position of being able to enable things to happen. And one of the questions we're kind of asking across the week of the festival is, with this huge history in Liverpool that often has come about through struggle, what could happen if we actually embedded it in our way of doing things? Actually, what doors could that open? What floodgates could that open in terms of communities really taking more control and being able to do things in their places? So
is that the Liverpool flavour, if you like, Kim? That difference that, the
I think
difference is because this is Liverpool.
Well, that is very much, the DNA of our city, Peg. We are a maverick city. We do, walk to the beat of a different drum. We're the city of many firsts. We were the first city to build council housing, to get rid of slum houses in 1896. So we do things very differently. Yes, we are a unique city, and I think more than anything, that's been shone through during the last almost 12 months of COVID. This city does what this city does best, and we look out for each other. The whole issue about mutual aid, community organisations working very collaboratively with the council and public health, and I think that has been, for me as a local MP, has just been inspiring to see, grassroots organisations doing some amazing, fantastic work. And I'd like to pay tribute to all of those organisations in my constituency who have pulled out the stops in the last 11 months, 12 months. They have been amazing.
Because of course you'll know many of those well, because you've always lived in the constituency, very much rooted in it. Let's bring that up to date now and talk again back, as we were talking about having more black-led people-powered housing in the area. We've mentioned information and support. Are there other things that you feel need to happen in order to really move this movement on? Breaking Ground are going to put together an action plan. What should they be doing?
I think there needs to be some kind of strategic buy-in, Peg. And I think if we're looking to work within our communities, we need to be getting the support of local councillors. Local councillors are democratically elected by constituents. They will understand some of the housing issues within each of their wards, because I would imagine, because I have a very heavy caseload of housing issues. So getting strategic buy-in from councillors using the positions in terms of engaging effectively with some of the groups and individuals within their particular wards, to start that movement building. They have contacts, they have names. I think it's a useful starting point. They will have inroads into community-led organisations within their wards as well. I think starting at that point in terms of galvanising some support and looking at what other voluntary community groups are active within each of the wards for that to happen would be really useful.
Would you be saying to your, to the councillors, get involved, actually this is important, and this is important in terms of creating a fairer city for everybody who lives in the city?
Definitely, and I'd say, Peg, that the councillors in my constituency are very active. They're very supportive, and I have no doubt that they would, want to support this initiative. Building houses that are green, that so that people live in high quality, affordable accommodation, so they're not living in substandard private rented sectors that impact on their health, that then impacts on our health service and impacts on children's education. So having high quality housing is beneficial all round. It's a win-win for everybody.
And the message to the combined authority, because obviously that there you were talking about councillors and the city council. What would be your message to the combined authority as well, in terms of how they can help this kind of people-powered movement happen?
Well, the combined authority, Peg, will have, a massive resource in terms of staffing, not necessarily finances, but they'll have resources. They'll be able to help and support, train people, and it's about being a voice to the government in terms of what's needed in this city. Steve Rotherham, as our Metro Mayor, has done a great job in the last 11 months in terms of fighting hard for resources for our city to manage COVID. And I think that going forward needs to be sustained, particularly in housing, because housing is a major issue for the city.
So Paul, what are you thinking about the sort of things that Kim's been talking about there?
No, I think it's really on the button, really, in terms of where we're at. And I think that it's interesting. I have started to make really strong connections with the councillors, and I think because there's a new energy to some of new people who are in those positions, there's a real willingness to be doing stuff on the ground. I'm really sensing that right across. I've been involved with Homebake for a long time up in Anfield, and Dan Carden, the MP, is really supportive, as are all the councillors, of enabling that project to happen. So I agree. I think I'm speaking with the Housing Select Committee at the council in early February, and just building those links so it's really connected rather than disconnected, I think, is really important.
Wherever I'm talking about engagement and consultation, I have pushed the issue that often we don't hear young people's voices. And as we know, young people have been affected by housing. How many young people can't get in the housing market, can't get property, rent property, because they can't get a deposit together. So young people have been significantly affected, in the last couple of years because of the economic downturn, because of austerity, students saddled with a noose around their necks with their student loans. How can you start, a working life with, 50,000 plus debt hanging around your neck? And so looking at the needs of young people, I think, is also very key. And so making sure that we have, the voices of young people in any work that we do, I think, is crucial.
Is there any message you haven't told us yet, Kim, that you'd also add to that in terms of the work that Paul and Breaking Ground are going to be doing?
I'd just say that I think it's fantastic. I saw the benefits in the 80s of housing co-ops, and so all these years on, I would like to see, a new version of, community-led housing. And as Paul's just mentioned, there are some, good examples in the city, Granby 4th Street, Homebaked. So we have a base to start from, but seeing that grow. And I know that there are plans, my friend Debbie from Greenhouse is looking to develop some on Lodge Lane. And so there will, people know that these resources and opportunities are available. I'm sure that we'll get more people wanting to get involved in doing that. And so you might want to look at developing houses to support a particular group of people, maybe people, with mental health issues, or, housing that, particularly meets the needs of disabled people. So it's about working closely with all of those groups to enable this process to happen. But I would say actions speak louder than the words, and often it's a community who get the job done. Let's make it happen, guys, is what I say.
Paul?
It's just fantastic, yeah. And I think I'm up for it. I think there's an energy. It is building. I call it building on the shoulder of giants, really, because I think Liverpool has got this great history, and we've got to build on that and move it forward. And I really like what Kim just said, actually, about this new model. The 80s, there was all that cooperative movement. There's all that expertise in the community already. How can we turn that into a new model moving forward? That is really inclusive and controlled by the community and driven by the community.
Well, Johnson, thank you so much for your time this morning. Paul, thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks very much. That was such a good conversation. Kim, I don't know if you want to put your mic back on for a sec. I mean, there were so many things that we covered there in that conversation. Before we go on to hear from Claude and Henri, is there anything else you'd like to add? And I just wanted to check, are you able to hang around with us for the Q&A later on? Or if you're not,
I'm here.
Perfect. That's brilliant, because it'd be really great to have your input into the discussion about what's next. Thank you very, very much.
You're very
But
welcome.
just to let you know as well, we will be having a little break on this because it's quite a long session. So there will be a bit of a quick toilet break and a drinks break just after we've heard from Claude and Henri. So can I come next to Claude then? There's a bit of across the other side of the Pennines takeover going on here. There's a bit of a Yorkshire flavour now as a handover to Claude. Claude and I know each other quite well because we worked together at Leeds Community Homes over the last sort of few years. But Claude's been around the community-led housing movement for over 20 years. He is a stalwart of the community-led housing movement. He's going to be talking to us about his experience in that and also his experience around equalities, diversity and inclusion. So Claude, take it away.
Thank you, Peg. Nice to see you. I hope, thank you for the invite, Paul Kelly and Breaking Ground. I hope you all haven't been zoomed out this week because they've been coming thick and fast from Liverpool. It's like, you know, an avalanche of Zoom links to attend events. I've been to a few events. It's been very impressive. So well done to Breaking Ground and all the team and Paul. Why I wanted to do it, I wasn't going to do it, but after listening to Kim, I thought, you know, I'll put it up. So what I'm going to do first is set the scene and then do my presentation. So I've got a little video. It takes 6 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen now. And it's, I'm hoping it doesn't stick. Sometimes when you play these videos off of YouTube, they stick and start. So let's go. I'm disabled.
Oh, sorry, let me just make you.
Yeah, come on, I know you've been doing it all week, you know.
And we were enjoying your emails as well, Paul, in that first bit.
Yeah, he should be really good. He should be really good at this. Now.
My name's Randolph Martin. Supposed to doing a house a month. We're a bit behind. There's still a fair bit for us to do. It's just that we're worried about getting the shelves up before the winter. I don't know. I reckon we'll still get them up for October, end of October. Yeah, I reckon so. 12 of us are building our own houses. Most of us live in substandard housing or homes that are not our own. We've been trying to get the outside work done by December. The project was a vision of one local man, Claude Hendrickson.
It was all cobbled streets. It was atrocious. And this is what really drives me. In the mid-80s, we had streets and streets of houses blocked up, empty, boarded up, doing nothing, whilst people were living 3 to a bedroom, 4 to a bedroom. And again, these were things that inspired us to get up and do the self-build. You're talking in maybe 20 houses, you're talking at least 8, 9 of them, not like this. And turn the camera. You know, you talk about 8, 9 of them in disrepair like this. This was the tendency in nearly every single street within Chapeltown. Last year, winter, this started happening.
This is my flat, a typical example of the housing around the area. And I can't live here anymore.
And it's not as bad now, but wait for the winter sets in again. I'm just going to drop down. My name is Michael Bent, one of the bricklayers for Frontline Self-Build. Today, Saturday,
but we've decided to come in today and actually finish the gable end so that we can actually have it all ready, prepared for Monday morning. To me, Frontline is my life. We're doing a good thing for the community, not just in building houses, but to teach the young generation out there, if they want something in life, they can actually get that with hard work. And this is upstairs. Got all the studding, the door liners are in position. This will be the bathroom. I mean, a lot of people have come in and says it's a bit small, but I mean, as far as we're concerned, it's us, you know. I know Mike, I brought all my kids up here, and right now they're arguing about the bedrooms. I think I've got to sleep downstairs now. But I don't mind. It's mine, my house. I built it. The weather's not been too kind to us, but we still managed to just keep up. I reckon we can still do it, depending on the guys. The other day it was raining, and when I say raining cats and dogs, and this guy was in the gutter, and I said, Mackie, tea time. And he said, Shorty, F the rain, let's get this trench dug. I mean, that's the kind of attitude I'd like to hear. Comic Relief has given us the money to pay for Graham Gill. He's our site supervisor. At this moment in time, we've been on site 6 months. We've put the equivalent of 10 houses, which really, realistically speaking, for a self-build, it's better than any self-build that's ever gone before it. No other self-build has managed to do it as quick as this, or to the standard that this one's been done either. This is the largest group that I know of within Chapeltown region, 12 men working together, and I think the experience that they gain from this will help them to stay together, to form a cooperative, and tender for work within the community.
Some of the people that are out of work right now, in a couple of years, we could be employing them ourselves and helping to solve the housing problem that we have in our community. You're not saying self-build can solve it, or we're not saying Frontline can solve the whole of it, but we're saying Frontline is definitely taking a step in the right direction.
My name is Tyson Thomas. My dad's name called Thomas Cecil Thomas.
The youths out there, they don't really have much really to look forward to, because I never. Now it's our turn to show our generation what they can really do if they put their mind to it. One love, what about a one love? What about a little? Get together and feel alright. As it was in the beginning. One love, oh, shall it be in the end? One love, alright. Thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel
alright. Okay, you nearly had me crying, Peg. Okay, right. Let's get to it. I've got 14 minutes. Somebody call. Sheila Webb wants to be let in.
Yeah.
You want me? Am I supposed to let them in?
No, I've let them in. They're in.
Okay.
My name's Claude Hendrickson. I'm the project manager for the race card project based at the Leeds Charitable Trust.
Where's that? What's that?
I think you've got something still playing on YouTube.
Let me find out what
you might need to turn off your YouTube first.
Yeah.
1958, and I was born in 1960. So from the outset, I think
right.
Our parents came from the Caribbean.
I see. Shut up. Okay, right. Yeah, right. I've got it. I've got it. I'm back there, Peg. I'm back there. I've got 13 minutes. Okay. Thank you. Another one to let in. I've let them in. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to speak at Breaking Grounds and how we can stimulate more Black-led projects. Oh gosh, shush. Um, I'm Claude Hendrickson. I'm the Quality, Diversity and Inclusion Associate to Leeds Community Homes, which was a project funded by the Cohesive Communities, funded by the National Community Land Trust network. Frontline, my journey, I'm going to today take you on an overview of my journey within the community-led housing world. In 1988, the Frontline Self-Build project was set up. You've just seen the video. We were set up in 88. We started building in March the 23rd, 1993, and we completed on October the 30th, 1994. 25 years on.
Wow.
They're the houses up at Frontline Close. I've taken a few people up there to visit them. You know, 92,000 bricks, 52,000 blocks. We built 12 houses, semi-detached houses, on an ex-quarry site, stone quarry site. They offered us the worst site they could offer us, but we made it work. The houses, so each set of houses, each set of 2 houses is built on a floating raft so that subsidence cannot be an issue going forward. 25 years on, and the houses, I was up there the other day, they're still there. 6 of the people still live in them that originally were in them. Others have given them over to family members. Frontline Self-Built, Leeds has a very strong history now in community-led housing. We were set up in 1988, and I believe we were the flagship in Leeds. In 1989, we had a project called Latch set up, which works on derelict properties. In 1998, another project called Canopy, Self-Help Community Housing Project. 1992, Gypsum formed, supporting living for members of local community that were concerned about a number of young people surfing, which sometimes with the Black community and the need for housing, because we're such an enclosed house, we sometimes our stats are not out there because we'll go and sleep at friends, we'll go and sleep at aunties, we'll go and sleep at uncle, you know. So sometimes the stats are not there. Lilac, which is the one that everybody talks about in Leeds, didn't even come about until 2006. So you can see from the 80s up to the 2000s, we're 20 years before. Then on site right now in Leeds, we've got Chapel Town Co-housing, which is on site now. I've got a couple of pictures at the bottom of when they were doing their community consultation. So Chaco's on site now. It actually had to shut down during COVID because the contractor actually went bust, and they've just had to get a new contractor in. So Leeds has a very strong history. And over the week, I've listened to some of the history of Liverpool, and it's impressive to know that some of our largest urban cities have dabbled with community-led housing in different ways, shapes, and fashions. I'm just to take you again on my journey. I'm a founder member of the Community Self-Build Agency, because I was actually inspired by a project called Zanzili in Bristol, which was set up in the early 80s, which was in the wake of the St. Paul's riots. So I'm wanting to give you this flavor that Black people and ethnic minorities have always tried to get involved in initiatives like this. But sometimes they say that we're hard to reach, but I have an opinion we've been easy to ignore over the time. And we really do want to. Anyway, Zanzili built a block of 12 flats. I went and saw that in, I think it was 87, and that was my inspiration. I actually wanted to do this. In 2020, the CSBA was born, the Community Self-Build Agency. And that agency that I was a founder member of, national agency, has done 178 projects across the UK during the last, since 2000, providing something like 1,200 housing units. So, you know, and I could show you a couple more videos that I have from a housing project. I think in Liverpool, they had a foyer at the time, a foyer project. We did supported projects in Newcastle, in London, in Bristol, all over the country. So yeah, 1,200 units. In 2010, Stella, who was the chair, and we were fortunate, the chair of the Community Self-Build Agency was the then Ken Clark's sister. You know, the Ken Clark from the Conservative Party. Stella Clark was his sister. So she was a shaker and mover. She could always grab her brother and give him an earful and make things happen. And it was during the time as well, back in the 80s, when housing was changed, when they created Black housing associations, and the housing corporation was created. So now they have Homes England, but back then it was the Housing Corporation that had the funding that distributed. Stella was introduced in 2010 to an ex-SAA officer. And what he explained to us that, and we looked into that, between 60 and 80% of all homeless men are actually ex-military bods that had been out of prison for, out of the army for a while, and they'd actually fallen on bad luck because they couldn't assimilate back into civil life. So their families broke up and they ended up on the streets on drugs. So we did a number of projects in Bristol for the veterans. And it was quite good because the MOD, the Military of Defence, is quite a big landholder in the UK. So we did a number of projects in Bristol for ex-military bods. In 2012, I became the Northern Director of the Community Self-Build Agency in a voluntary capacity. That gave me the power to go and promote self-build to areas in the north. I visited York and places like that where I knew they had military land, and could we access that? So you know, over the last 20 years, I've been banging on doors. And one thing I'd like to say is that none of them doors were very welcoming to me. I don't know if it was because I was a Black guy, but none of them organizations engaged me, wanted to engage me, wanted to use the talents that I had. So I had to go off and do other things in the community, like run youth projects and stuff like that. But I've always kept banging the drum as the voluntary director. In 2015, I was commissioned by Leeds City Council to produce a 10-year strategy for self-build, because we were wanting to contribute to solving the housing crisis in Leeds. This is the leaflet. When I launched the research, it was done at the Civic Hall in Leeds. I managed to get all of those partners, Gypsil, Canopy, all of them together in one place, and I produced a document. And I'm gonna have to, I've got 4 minutes left. Back then it was estimated Leeds needed to build between 50 and 70,000 houses to meet the needs between then and 2028. This equates to around 4,000 dwellings per year. At that time, the current housing waiting list was about 21,000. Most houses built in Leeds were being built by property developers who also contracted to small housing associations for both council and local housing associations. It's clear that the community-led sector can only contribute a small percent, but at least it can contribute. Within the strategy, we were looking at something like, 200 could be self-build or brought back into. So self-build or self-help is not just about self-build. It might be renovating or empty properties, bringing properties back into use. We reckon by 2026, we could be supporting 500 homes per year. We reckon 2,000 people would visit the Leeds City Council website to find out about community-led. We also were very interested in getting and supporting long-term unemployed people, because we think there's an option to get more people, especially our young people, to look at construction as a vocation. In 2019, I joined Leeds Community Homes as their Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Associate. In January 2020, which was the beginning of last year, I became the first Black male community-led advisor in the UK. So I was the first one male to go through the process of becoming accredited and get accredited. My role is to get more Black and minority groups involved in the sector. The most important goal for the Leeds Cohesive Communities project was to encourage more minority groups, Black, Asian, LGBT, and people with disability to become more involved in the community-led sector. So to achieve its equality, diversity, and inclusion. Right, 1 more minute left. To build new and refurbished homes, to create employment enterprise in our city region, and also to develop a strategy. I've been talking about developing a strategy for homeless people to become involved in the sector, and another group, newly migrated and documented people, to get on the housing ladder. Wow. I'm not even over my 20 minutes yet, Paul. Thank you very much for that. I had to whistle through it because Paul says to me, do not go over 20 minutes, do not go over 20 minutes. So thank you for that. I will stop sharing now. Right, thank you for that. I hope you got all of that.
Wow, Claude, I've known you a few years, but that video is really something else, and I think just absolutely inspirational. And I know when we get to the chat afterwards about what Breaking Ground can do, you're going to have loads to input from your experience of how it's been going in Leeds. Around improving inclusion on what should happen. Catherine said in the chat that you are inspiring. It's absolutely true. And Paul said it's the first time I've properly heard you speak like that, Claude, but absolutely brilliant, honestly. And if anyone, I know that Paul and Catherine know that I say this all the time, if anyone ever doubts the power of video, right, and of recording the moments as they happen, all you need to do, I think, is watch that video that Claude showed. When he said, that's my home, I built it, right, or whatever the line was, there's no more powerful 10 seconds anywhere for what we're trying to do. Honestly, it's just brilliant. Sorry, I'm welling up again thinking about that. So thank you, Claude. Absolutely wonderful. We're going to come back and have a lot more conversation with you about what we can do. Henri, hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Your face, brilliant. Let me introduce Henri Baptiste to you all. Henri is the founder and director of Pathway Housing Solutions in Nottingham. They're committed to developing and managing and maintaining decent, affordable, quality homes in diverse communities. So Henri, you're going to tell us about your work that you've been doing. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me along, Peg and Paul. Really looking forward to being involved in breaking ground, not only today, but going forward as well. It seems like there's some good stuff going up and taking place in Liverpool. I'm from the Midlands, the East Midlands, a city called Nottingham. Have you got my slides up?
Let me just sort that for you, Henri.
While Paul's sorting that out, I thought I'd start with a little bit of history about myself. So myself and Claude actually met each other, I think it was November 2019. We both were doing the community-led housing advisor training. And what was really stark about and what was really noticeable was the lack of Black people on that course. And I think there were about 16 to 20 people on the course we were on. I think they were running maybe 15 to 20 courses in total. And from my understanding, me and Claude were I think there were less than 5 BME people across the whole of the cohorts. So what that shows you is that within this sector, even in terms of the workers, the advisors, the organizations, it's a white-led sector. And so as a BME-led organization, we acknowledge that we're coming from a different place. And it's important to recognize that as a BME-led organization, there are other barriers and challenges that we face as well. So Pathway Housing Solutions, we're a community housing company, as it says, sets up to provide housing for those in need. And generally for us, that means targeting people that are homeless and people that are BME background, and to work with partners to tackle the challenges faced by our communities. So moving on to the next slide. Who are we in a bit more detail, and quickly going on to the third slide. So that slide basically tells a little bit more about who Pathway Housing Solutions are. So we're not for profit, we're a social enterprise founded by local residents in Nottingham. Nottingham is a city where the council are quite paternal. They like to be in control very much and deliver services directly or in partnerships with organisations that are very well established and have been around for years. We're run by local residents, supported by industry experts, and that's important. I think it's important because within our organisation, we don't have all the skill sets that are needed. If you're talking about developing housing, then you're talking about skill sets that aren't easily accessible within the community. We're talking about people maybe who are quantity surveyors, people that are architects. And one of the things that we look to do is to build relationships with not just the community, but the wider community in terms of the business community as well. As it says, we place a special emphasis on community, and our main goal is to create and expand affordable housing to some of the most disadvantaged, diverse, and economically challenged people. So going down to the final bullet point there, the two methods that we use for delivering housing solutions are through homemade, which is essentially about getting hold of and retrofitting and renovating empty properties, and the other is laying the foundations, and that's about new build housing on small sites, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Social enterprise model, which you see on slide 4, basically explains in a bit more detail or pictorially what our approach is. Our approach very much on the left is about building new homes, so small infill sites, brownfield sites, renovating empty properties to create new homes, and enabling and supporting others to develop homes. And on the right hand side, it is very much our community focus. Part of that is running a range of programs. So we run parenting programs, ESOL programs, employability programs, feeding programs for the homeless. That's our community side. And from our perspective, it's very much about bringing the two together. The reality is that work, health, employment, and housing are the cornerstones of society. And we see that very much about what Pathway Housing Solutions is about. So why are we doing this? Well, that's the question. Let's move on to slide 6. We're doing this for a variety of reasons, but the main one being the housing crisis. The reality is there is a shortage of homes in the right areas. There is insufficient social housing. People are struggling to access social housing these days. People are spending years and years on the council waiting list with no chance of ever being provided with social housing. House prices are increasing. People are struggling to buy or to rent in the private rented sector. And there's the issue around affordability that supports that. There's overcrowding in houses and poor quality social temporary housing. When I was growing up, I grew up in the 60s in Nottingham. My parents were from the West Indies and met in England. And my earliest memories was of us living in a house and playing with other children in the house and realizing that the household didn't just consist of my parents and my brothers and sisters, but consisted of about another 2 or 3 families as well. And when I say 2 or 3 other families, we shared a room with another family. So growing up, I didn't actually realize that we were actually homeless. And I remember one night, I must have been about 5 or 6, we carried all our belongings, and it was the dead of night, it was dark. Me, my brothers and my sisters and my mum carried our belongings across a main road and walked for probably about 3 miles to this other house that we moved into. So for me, I think the issue of housing inequality and poverty go together hand in hand, and social injustice. Moving on to the next slide then. Some of the key issues everybody here will probably be aware of is, and some of this is shown in pictorial diagram, is people are struggling to get on the housing ladder. It's becoming further and further out of reach for them. There's a big issue around empty properties and empty homes. This government, through the affordable housing programme, is focused more so on first homes, developing more homes for market as well, rather than social housing. As it says there in that target, 250,000 homes are needed each year, but there's a shortfall. The other key issue for us as an organisation is that COVID-19 and its impact, not just in terms of health and health inequalities, but the moratorium that the government currently has in place. And once that comes to an end in March, we will see a massive increase, a massive jump in what's called Section 21 notices, essentially where landlords are going to kick people out. Thanks. Next slide. So the empty homes crisis, and it says what it is. There it is. Over 1.4 million people are on a social housing waiting list. Over 9,000 people just in Nottingham are on the council's waiting list. Over 4,000 homes are sitting empty in Nottingham. But at the same time, England has over 268,000 empty homes. Nottingham, as I said, has over 4,000 empty homes. That's an increase of over 10%. And from our view, there is a clear solution to help ease the housing crisis. Thank you. Can we have the next slide? So the diagram there just points it out, and you might be able to pull out Liverpool there. So that diagram there gives you an actual view of the level of empty homes in England. Liverpool, 4,361 empty properties. What could you do if we converted all those empty properties, brought them back into use? How many households could we provide housing to? How many jobs could we create as a part of that? How many training opportunities could we create? So, having a decent, stable, affordable home is a key determinant of people's health and well-being. True. From a BME perspective, we know that through every crisis, Black and minority ethnic groups are disproportionately affected because they are already at the sharp edge of structural and systemic inequality. And that in a statement on its own might be a bit of a mouthful, but it's one to consider and reflect on. Because for 4 decades of struggle by BME communities, regardless of all the legislation that's been introduced, we're still failing to confront adequately and systematically the racial disadvantage and discrimination in housing. And poverty is increased amongst BME groups. Poor housing outcomes are occurring in these communities. In fact, And some of you will recognize those images. And the reason I put those images in is because it's quite salient. The reality is the Windrush generation are my parents and the parents of many kind of first generation, second generation migrants or immigrants. When my parents came here, the story of no dogs, no Irish, no blacks, that was the reality of what they faced. And whilst discrimination might not be as direct or overt as it was at that time, the reality is that discrimination in housing still exists now. It's just a lot more subtle, and it's embedded into policy as well. Moving on to the next slide. So BME homelessness matters, and that's the focus of what Pathway Housing Solutions is about. So according to Shelter, 1 in 3 homeless households are not white, compared to around 1 in 7 in the general population. There's been a 22% increase in statutory homelessness. And then the figures talk about among white households, it rose 9%, whereas amongst BME households, it rose 48%. Can I have the next slide, please? So what are we doing as an organisation? There are a number of things that Pathway Housing Solutions is doing. One of the key things that we think and we've experienced is the need to provide evidence. And myself and Claude are going to be talking about some of the research that we're doing jointly later on. But the reality is that 62% of homelessness is hidden. What that means is all the reported figures that you see and hear about are only a tip of the iceberg. There's been little research into housing inequalities and BME homelessness. And from our point of view as an organisation, the first step in tackling homelessness in the BME community is a better understanding of the extent of, reasons for, and impact of homelessness and the barriers to its prevention. We also feel that is once the causes of homelessness within the BME community are properly understood, then that provides a platform to tackle them. And so, can we move to the next slide, please? So another area of work that we're involved in, as well as undertaking a piece of research that we're currently involved in, is we're delivering a project that we've called Homemade. And Homemade essentially is about bringing empty properties back into use, but it's also about equipping people with skills in construction. It's about providing pastoral support. It's also about providing support for people once they move into the properties, support with tenancy sustainment, support with independent living skills. So Homemade is a project that we're currently working on. We've got 2 sites that we're currently in negotiation to purchase. We're also looking at a community centre to acquire as well. So from our perspective, Homemade is very much about recognising that we're giving people the skills to develop housing that they will ultimately move into. And then 15, laying the foundation, that's another arm to what Pathway Housing Solutions, and this is our approach to new build homes. So essentially that's about small pockets of brownfield land, building energy efficient homes, and the idea behind that is about addressing fuel poverty, creating job opportunities for our supply chain. One of the key things that we found out recently, because we've been doing a study about the underrepresentation of BME professionals in the built environment sector, what that basically means is there aren't enough black professionals who are quantity surveyors, architects, and there's clear challenges and barriers in terms of engaging, recruiting young people into universities, and then for them attaining success at university and then going on to finding employment in the sector. So there are some real barriers, and part of what we want to do for our approach is to provide opportunities not only for trade jobs, but also opportunities for BME people to get involved and get experience and qualifications in some of the higher professions. So what are the challenges and opportunities? Massive. The reality is, as a BME-led organisation, I think one of the key things to understand is that we have deep roots that go back several decades. If you consider the 1980s, that was the time where I remember there were the race riots, and it may be distant in other people's memory, or for some of you, you may not have even realised that happened, but the 80s was quite a significant time in terms of communities taking control. And the reality is the 80s was also the time in which there was a growth in the BME social housing movement through housing association. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So, challenges and opportunities. And I've got it up there. We can't rely on local government. And I'm not suggesting that we don't work in partnership. We can't rely on central government, and I'm not suggesting that we don't work in partnership. But we know from experience that if we rely on those organisations to provide a pathway into sorting out our own housing solutions, it won't happen. It won't happen. And that's why it's important for communities to take control. The reality is it is within the gift of local authorities to support community-led housing. They have the power to do that. They have it written in legislation. But the question is it within their will? The other challenge is investment, access to social investment. And one of the elements of the research that myself and Claude are looking at is looking at how funding investment is allocated and distributed across the community-led housing sector, because our initial findings is that it's disproportionate. And part of that is about recognizing that the systems that are set up to make decisions to support or fund or invest in community-led housing don't necessarily have people within those organizations who have the lived experience of BME people. And so their systems are set up for traditional white-led organizations. So access to investment is a real challenge. The role of council and having access to the council. When we talk about the council, we talk about it as one organisation, but the reality is the council is made up of planning, it's made up of housing, it's made up of regeneration. And it's about ultimately whether or not the council and all the departments that sit within there and the councillors are supportive of it. From our perspective, going forward, Pathway Housing Solutions has formed relationships with housing associations. So for the schemes that we've mentioned, we've formed relationships with local partners who can support us in terms of developing our capacity as an organisation, providing skills in terms of development, providing support in terms of accessing finance, providing access to Homes England grants through their relationship with them. So for us, we're not an organisation, and whilst we're BME led, we're not BME exclusive. And part of that is recognising as an organisation, as a body, we work with communities, and communities are diverse. Business communities are diverse, and it's essential as an organisation that we don't exclude ourselves from the rest of society, but embrace the opportunities that community has to offer. And within that view, we're also organising a series of webinars about community-led housing, and have invited a range of stakeholders, including Community Land Trust Network, Cooperative and Community Housing, who will be speaking at those events. We've invited the City Council and Housing Association partners to sit as part of that as well. So next steps, I suppose the final presentation slide is not just about what we're doing, but what also is happening in Leeds. What are you doing? But also going back to my point about partnership work, and it's about what can we do collaboratively together with you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Henry. Wow, getting lots of people clapping as well. Honestly, what two amazing presentations. I mean, I've learned a lot over the last, those two presentations. I mean, one thing I would say is I really like the fact that both of you as well brought it back to people right at the heart of it as well, because sometimes when we talk about process a lot, when we're talking about organisations, I think we forget some of those real human stories actually that are at the heart of this, and how important it is to hear those. What we're going to do now, if it's okay, is just have a really quick 5-minute comfort. I think comfort break's the official description, isn't it? Basically, you can go to the toilet, get yourself a quick cuppa. So don't click off, stay on. You might want to put yourself on mute or turn your camera off for this. Literally 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and Henri and Claude are going to run through this major piece of national research that they're working on at the moment, which is really looking into what we can do. And then we're going to open up the debate and we're all going to get chatting. There's been some great chat already in the chat function, but then we're going to start talking about what can happen in the Liverpool City region, what breaking ground needs to do. So everybody go get a cuppa. We'll see you back, it's 9:15 now, we'll see you back at 20 past if that's all right. And Tom's already got his cup in his hand, you see, he's raring to go, well done. We'll see you back at 20 past and we'll start then.
Wow, Peg.
Yes.
That's just blown me away.
Absolutely, we're all blown away, I think. That video. Can't believe I've not seen that video before.
No, I just can't believe it.
Oh, why have you been hiding that video? It's the best thing ever.
You've not seen that video before?
No. I mean, both. And what, Henry, what you were talking about in terms of that skill set, that, you know, this new community land trust that's set up, how could we do something of scale in Liverpool 8 around that model that you've set up with that organisation?
I think, you know what, one of the things, I didn't necessarily bring this into the presentation, but one of the key things I think to consider, the reason we're partnered within a housing association, I think there's real value in that, is because as an organisation that's BAME led, without a track record, without an asset base when we started, it's difficult to get yourself in front of some of the key stakeholders. They don't take you as seriously. And I think because we are community based, because we come from that social enterprise community perspective, institutions tend to look at you in a certain way. So being able to partner with other organisations is really valuable. And if you can partner with a housing association, then they can bring their expertise to the table. If you can partner with a housing association, they can access Homes England grant on your behalf. And so with the homemade model, we're partnering with a housing association, and we've designed a model that's just been signed off by Homes England, okay, which enables us to be able to acquire and renovate empty properties. So there is scope, right? But I think because we spent probably a year and a half developing that model and making lots of mistakes, speaking to lots of partners, and we've spoken to people across the UK. But it is, if that's a route that communities want to go down, and in that diagram, I think I showed there was about 4,000 empty properties in Liverpool, then bringing them back into use, yeah, can achieve so much. And bringing it back into use with a housing association partner that's ethical, I suppose that's the term as well. Yeah, ethical housing association.
Yeah. And what I would have added to that is that, I mean, what Henry's presenting now is actually what we kind of was presenting 25 years ago after the 81 riots, and we did our project in partnership with Leeds Federated Housing, which acted as a big brother and brought in the money, and we acted as the developer, but we also created a housing association. So I think the needs, the process, we kind of look at housing as more than just building a unit. It's about the package. It's about the other things that can be done with it. I remember when we was trying to set up Frontline self-build, and you would have the then Chancellor of Leeds University, who was in Civic Hall, and he stand up and say, well, he has no evidence that a group of black men working together could achieve anything, you know, and you're fighting against that. And like I said, even within Leeds, you're fighting against people that are thinking that a black person can't have some of the solutions. You know, we're living, this is our lived journey, and we've come up with solutions. It's not saying that Indigenous people can't also have solutions. That's why, like Henry said, and I met Henry, what, 18 months ago. I met him in Newcastle at an advisors training day in Newcastle. And he was, you know, and we just gelled because we had the same aspirations. And I've come back to the system, I've come back to the community-led world, and there's another brother like me who's trying to do the same thing, and it was just instant. And I think sometimes, even based on Windrush, based on Black Lives Matters, based on all of those inequality arguments, that we've had to learn from bottom up, and we've had to take on face all the barriers that existing and historical community-led projects have had to face. But we've also had to take on the fact, because we're from the black community, that we don't know what we're talking about. And even within the sector, getting individuals within the sector that are leading on projects like I spoke about in Leeds, to accept that we bring something to the table. You know, it's almost like we always need help, but we can't help others. And that's why me and Henry have agreed absolutely when we say Black led, that doesn't mean we're going to exclude any other people, any other grouping that want to be in our projects, because, you know, you might have a Black builder who has a white girlfriend. You might have, you know, it's not about, we've never been about exclusion. We're always about inclusion. But I often say that, and I mentioned it earlier, that they say Black and ethnic minorities are hard to reach. And I say they've been easy to ignore for a long time. And we come to the table, we bring skills to the table. You know, when I see Kim and I see Nazra as councillors or MPs, we bring things to the table. We bring life experience, lived experience to the table. So yeah, you know, whenever I see Henry's presentation, like Peg said earlier, it brings a tear to my eyes, because I'm so glad to have another brother in the room that's saying the things I was saying 20 years ago. And that's why, you know, all of it, employment, training, capacity building, empowering, and that's what community-led housing is. And sometimes I feel that they spend too much time just concentrating on the units that they can deliver and not the external things and value for money. When we look at value for money, it's not just bricks and mortar, it's empowering people. But anyway, thank you for coming back. Tom Moore, I've seen your name in a window. Somebody, I think I'm getting in contact with you in the near future. Yeah, that's right, Claude. I'm gonna email you after this, actually. So directly after this. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a piece of work for the CLT network on the Cohesive Communities Fund, which is why I'm making contact with Claude. And I had a question for that, which maybe I'll save for the Q&A. Yeah. You say it for later. I mean, what I would add is that Henry's been a breath of fresh air for me, you know, because otherwise it would have been me on my own again. And I've been doing this for 20 years. To have Henry and Henry's passion and his real understanding of the other sides of it, you know, has been fantastic. I mean, him speak all the time. And like I said, even though we're two Black brothers, we only met 18 months ago. You know, I didn't know he existed. He didn't know I existed. But, you know, we bang heads now, and we're really trying to get the sector. And again, we keep saying this. I heard Henry say it, and I will say it. We are about empowering Black-led projects, but we're not about excluding any, because it's Black-led doesn't mean other people can't be in it. Can I, all right, sorry, Peg, back to you.
Tell you what, Claude, how about, right, because I can see Stephen wants to come in, and I have to say, as far as I'm concerned, you can't have too much bromance on a community-led housing. It's good for all of us, honestly. It's
we're starting to clone into each other as well now. It's starting to look alike.
Going places we didn't think, but it's absolutely brilliant. Do you want to introduce very quickly the research and just tell us about that, and then let's open it up to the discussion, because there's so many issues, ideas come through the chat. I know people want to join in, so if you want to introduce the two of you the research, then we'll open it up. We'll start talking about the way forward. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Like I said, me and Henry met up about 18 months ago, and we kind of agreed that there's something missing. There's something missing in this, and so we've been banging away, and fortunately now we've put together. We're doing some research into BAME and Black ethnic minority into community-led housing.
Can I just quickly say something, Claude? Yeah, I think one of the key things to acknowledge is when me and Claude first got together, Claude has been around a lot longer than I have and is more familiar with the sector and how it operates. But one of the key things where there was a clear common ground was that there hadn't been any real change in the time that Claude had been around. And not only that, but there were additional opportunities that have been created through Homes England funding. There was a community-led housing funding that came into the sector. But the reality is there were very few BME-led groups and consequently, very few BME people that benefited from the millions of pounds that were put into the sector, right? And so what our argument isn't just about saying this is about pushing BME-led groups, but it's about ensuring that BME-led organisations are at the table as well, the tables where decisions are made and at the table where funding is allocated. And in order to be able to influence that, we need to understand how the sector works and how it operates. And that kind of sits behind the rationale that Claude's going to go into now.
Yeah. So yeah, again, in England there are overall barriers for community-led housing developments. This is exacerbated by, within the BAME community, levels of deprivation, stressed environments produced by decades of austerity, entrenched and institutional racism. And experience of community activism which is what Henry was just been talking about in the community-led sector. There are no inherent, I'm trying to juggle stuff around here, inherent lack of awareness of the opportunities within BAME communities, and potential beneficiaries are afforded limited access to to housing opportunities. There is little or no existing research into this issue. That's why we've taken on this. And I don't want to go through word for word because I know that you really want to get us to talk to us. Our objectives with this proposal is to examine structural barriers for BAME-led organisations and BAME-led communities in accessing pathways to affordable rented and home ownership options. Review organisational approaches to enabling communities to provide affordable housing that meets their needs within policies and strategies related bodies and strategic operating frameworks. To survey government offices, local authorities, intermediary and funding organisations in the community-led housing sector on the way Black BAME issues are perceived and addressed. To review and take up the community-led housing models and definitions of community-led assets on how it might disproportionately impact BAME communities. Identify barriers to opportunities for transformation of BAME community-led housing sector. Develop and report how the sector operates, draw out evidence of where impact benefit BAME communities, to highlight good practice examples, to produce a series of recommendations and an action plan on how the sector can address BAME-led community housing more. Scope future funding opportunities with the sector for implementation of actions and new development. There'll be 9 stages within this proposal. Henry, you want to take us through the 9 stages?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the research itself is broken down into these key stages that are mapped in front of you. And the initial stage, as you can see, I mean, it says what it is on the tin, really, is to undertake a scoping exercise. And we've done some of that to a degree. Following that, we'll take a snapshot of the community-led housing sector across the UK. So that's more of a mapping exercise. And that'll enable us to look at the range of different types of projects, how they're funded, compare BME-led organisations with other organisations, look at where the gaps might be, then look at policies and strategies that are currently in place and develop a report from that. Another area is to look at undertaking surveys. So we're going to look at gathering information from a range of different sources, and those sources will not just be from When we say community-led housing covers both cooperatives, it covers CLTs, it covers a range of different types of models. So we're gathering information from a range of different sources, SWOT analysis, and then reports. So ultimately, the report is looking at the sector in its entirety. And I think the key thing to recognise here, within the community-led housing sector, you have organisations such as hubs, you have organisations such as social investment bodies, you have organisations such as government bodies. So the range of different organisations that actually make up the sector. And if we talk just about the hubs, then and the type of support that they offer, we just look at the numbers of BME-led organisations, then we're missing a trick. Part of what we need to be looking at is also the other institutions and organisations that support this structure. So if we were looking at government, for example, it would be looking at how they allocate, the percentage of allocation currently to BME-led organisations. How's that worked out? How's that mapped out? If we're looking at social investors, we'd look at their allocation of investment to BME-led organisations. Where are the gaps? What are the issues? So it's quite an extensive piece of work, and what we're going to couple that with is kind of drip feeding the results from this research, and the research itself will probably be about 6 to 12 months. We'll be drip feeding some of our findings throughout that process. I mean, we'll also be running a range of events, workshops, webinars in order to involve all the key stakeholders, and also to promote more awareness about BME-led housing and community-led housing, as well as really just to encourage and raise awareness to communities across the UK about the benefits. And there are real benefits in terms of community-led housing. But I think the reality is, as well as that, as BME people, there are also barriers there. And part of what we want to do through this research is to work with the key agencies to challenge and address and break down and change and remove those barriers that are in place, so that the groups that come after us have an easier route.
Yep. So that's a kind of whistle stop of the research that we're doing. We well, something's missing from where have you gone? Anyway, we I had another picture in there. So yeah, what we're looking at, we managed to get Power to Change to give us some support to bring down our proposal. It's now ready to go. We're now actively looking for funding. Oh, there it is. We're actually actively looking for funding to support it. Power to Change has contributed a little bit more. And
Land Force Network.
Yeah. So we've now gone out to the hubs to ask for if they can make a contribution. And it's quite funny, because over this last year, because of COVID and because of everything of having to be online, it has actually helped crystallize the missing Black faces a lot of the time on webinars, on Zooms. You know, I go to the hubs meetings, I think there's, if I'm wrong, there's either 26 or 27 hubs across the UK. Not one of them has a Black face leading it. And it's, you know, I go to the hub meetings, I go to many meetings, whether it's UK co-housing, whether it's all of them. There is no, I'm sometimes, if Henry's not there, I'm the only Black face there. And it isn't disheartening, but on the other hand, it is disheartening that it's almost like, are there no Black people in the UK? You know,
I think that's a valid point, though, Claude, that you're making, because the reality is, and what we do, and if I take Nottingham as an example, the government gave a range of local authorities across the UK money to appoint community-led housing officers, and part of their remit was to stimulate interest in community-led housing. But the reality is, BME communities, going back to the terms that you used earlier on, Claude, are hard to reach or difficult to engage. But the reality is BME communities aren't aware or are disproportionately aware of the opportunities and the benefits that community-led housing can offer them to provide solutions for their own housing situation. And part of what we were going to be doing, and I think clearly this is what you guys are about, is about bringing that awareness. But I think the other kind of key thing to consider is people get involved for different reasons and at different levels as well. And it's about acknowledging sometimes within Nottingham, for example, if we're looking at stimulating more interest in community-led housing, it's also about equipping people with the skills to engage in the process and recognizing that the process from identifying a site or a property to the point in which you've actually got you've got the site built, the property's built or renovated. It can be a long process. And some people simply just want to be involved in the campaign or the lobbying. Others might want to get their hands dirty and actually get involved in the nitty gritty. But I think the key thing to understand is that people will need support, and they can also benefit some training and some knowledge about the sector and how it works, and building relationships with local authorities and housing associations. It isn't a insurmountable task, but I think the key thing for me, and I think the key thing that you recognise from Claude, is we're quite passionate about this, yeah. But we also have got a thick skin, and we're resilient as well. And I think that's the reality of entering into this place, is that it is you're entering a place where, as BME-led communities, BME-led people, there aren't that many of us. There aren't that many BME, and so it's almost being able to understand the marketplace that we're going into and the pathways that are available to people, yeah, because there are many community-led housing groups out there that are benefiting from being part of a network, but there are also many BME groups that aren't benefiting from it. And part of what we want to do is stimulate, encourage, raise awareness and understanding.
Yeah, and what I'd say before
we
go
move on to some of the questions.
Sorry, just one thing I wanted to say. Sometimes they keep talking about barriers and stuff like that. The sector needs to look at the opportunities that could be there if they engage BAME and ethnic minorities wholeheartedly. Go on, Peg. Sorry.
That's all right. I know we'll come back to you, Paul, at this point. So let's kind of open up the discussion. There is a question, though, that I think we have to bottom before we get into the conversation, which Caleb put, which was, what happened to the other 11, Claude, from Frontline? Is everyone still living in the houses?
No, as far as Frontline, 6 of Frontline still live there. 6 of them, a couple of them have sold their properties on. A couple of them have rented out their properties. 2 of them have actually passed away and died. And so their children, because we did a shared ownership, it wasn't an outright ownership. And what I didn't talk about within that, we did our project on the back of the last economic downturn in the 90s, 91, 92, when they were repossessing 40,000 houses a week. We were trying to build houses. So no, they're still there. My youngest brother was one of the builders. I originally wanted to build my own house because it was my idea, but then I became the project coordinator. So I had to make a decision that it was more important that the project happened and maybe I didn't get a house in that street. And I've got one here where I live now, but I now am the executor for my past dead brother's house, so I'm up there all the time. So yes, 6 of them still live there. And all of them, nearly all of them, who the majority of them had no construction skills whatsoever before we started. Many of them are working in construction now. Some of them have got their own plumbing companies. Some of them have got their own plastering companies. Some of them have got their own brick companies. Some of them, one of them actually went to be the maintenance manager of Latch and was with Latch for many years. So yeah, they're all in a fashion entered the construction industry in some way, shape or form.
Brilliant. Right then. So we've only got 15 minutes left, right? And I know that there's going to be so much people want to say. So I know Stephen had put his hand up. We are going to come back to Paul as well. If you want to say something, I can see everybody on the screen. Or if you've got your camera off, just use the raise hand function. That will put a little sign on your sort of widget thing on Zoom, and I'll be able to see that you want. So Stephen, over to you. Let's get the conversation going, particularly around what Breaking Ground needs to do.
Okay, just say hello to Claude. We had a little exchange on a Zoom thing yesterday.
Okay, was it you, Steve?
About heads together. Anyway, I just wanted to go back to the question you put in your first presentation when you were saying how difficult it was to get people to pay any attention to what you were doing. Was it because you were black or because it was about self-build? And I think it's absolutely about both. I did a bit of research for Joseph Rowntree Foundation in 1999 with Stella Clark at CSBA and the other three self-build bodies, Walter Seagull, Young Builders Trust and Community Self-Build Scotland. And I was absolutely astonished at the levels of kind of condescension and contempt that people in positions of power had for anybody trying to come up with their own housing solution. And Henri alluded it to a bit as well in his kind of comments about city council being rather patronising and paternal. And I think that is still a really important factor in how community-led housing still has to kind of make a case for itself. The idea that it's odd that people aren't willing to just sort of sit on the waiting list forever, passively, that they might actually go out and do something for themselves is not seen as a kind of a obvious thing that people might do. So what I'll do is I'm just putting together a couple of bits that relate to that research, which might be useful in the bit of research that you're doing now, and I'll try and post it on the chat before you finish.
Yeah. I put my email. In the chat, and yes, I think you're right. I find that some people, when they get into community-led housing, they think they created it, you know, and it's not to be shared. It's just like community land trust. One of the things I found out over the last 6 months was that CLTs came out of the civil rights movement in America. It wasn't a British invention, but they give you the impression that it was a British invention. What, you know, and obviously, you know, all I've ever wanted to say is that anybody that is in the community-led housing sector, all of us have got a head, 2 arms and 2 legs. It's not about personalities, it's about the sector, it's about engaging. So yeah, I agree, and I'd love to see that data. I'd love we want to put into our proposal any reference points that we can.
Kim, I know you've said you wanted to join in at this point.
Yeah, let me just, I'm muted. Thanks, Peg, and thanks to both Henri and Claude for the amazing presentations and the videos. Very inspiring, you know, in terms of what can happen in Liverpool. But I was particularly taken with Henri's details of the number of vacant properties nationally, you know, over 4,000. And Claude's particular point about the council allocating, you know, a shit piece of land for you to build on. So in terms of moving forward, having people in positions that make sure that doesn't happen. What I was saying is about, you know, that level of engagement with councillors and sitting on planning committees and stuff to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because if it's going to be successful, you know, having the right land in the right place that meets the need is a definite must. You know, and just to say that we've had some interesting schemes in Liverpool in terms of bringing homes back into use. That the houses for £1 scheme, you know, it was covered by Channel 4 and was not, I think, portrayed in a very positive light. But if you ask all those people who live in those homes, that they've developed themselves to a certain extent, going down the same route as community-led housing, because a lot of those people worked on them themselves. You know, my daughter benefited from one of them, and it's building a new community in what was derelict buildings. So I think, you know, looking at how more of that can happen in the city will be really beneficial going forward. Thanks, guys. Thanks for organising this event.
What I will say to you, Kim, is that at the Brighton Labour conference, I under housing, I tabled, because I'm active in my local, I'm the BAME officer for my local CLP Labour Party, and at the Labour Council I tabled a motion, or supported a motion for more community-led housing to be supported. And even within Leeds, I'm trying to meet, well, I have met with her, the lead councillor on housing. So yeah, and I was hoping that if Labour had got in, it would have been one of our manifesto pledges to support community-led housing.
Yeah, thanks, Claude.
Thank you.
Caleb, do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to ask Claude, actually, if he wanted to reflect a little bit on his work so far with the Leeds community-led housing hub and how that's going in terms of kind of black-led community-led housing.
Good question. What I would say is that Leeds Community Homes have a director in Steve Howie, that he created Canopy Housing. He was a catalyst for Canopy Housing, and he was the one that took the bold step of getting the funding for me to be their cohesive communities worker, 2 days a month. And when I joined Leeds Community Home, they had no black and ethnic minority people on the board. They had no ethnic minority people within their staff network, and they had a very small membership of ethnic minorities. Now, less than 18 months later, they've got 2 black and ethnic minority people on the board. They've got me working with their staff team, and we had a really good event, and the numbers of people joining Leeds Community Homes on the website has increased. So what I can say about Leeds Community Homes, I was pushing on a semi-open door. It is now fully open, and Steve is supportive of what I'm doing. Leeds Community Homes are acting as the fund holder for the research that me and Henri are trying to do. So Leeds Community Home is, they're trying, and they're very supportive of what I'm doing.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Who else would like to join in? Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I'd just quite like to, it came up in from Caleb on some of the chat. So today, really, I mean, it's been fantastic, and I think I've never seen those presentations before. And I think, and I have to say this as well, almost, you know, I'm sure your project, Claude, got a lot of publicity at the time, but it's not a project I was aware of. And what's that about? That says something in itself, because it's an incredible project what you delivered there. So just so Caleb and some of the other, so Breaking Ground has just started. We were funded for this 1 year. It's quite interesting. We've just launched, but we could be about to shut because our funding runs out at the end of March. Although we have applied for a further 2 years from Power to Change, who have made a kind of public commitment to that. We just hope our bid suits their requirements. But at the moment, there's just me. So there isn't an organisation. It's just, I've just been employed to try to get this moving and get it going. But what I was very clear about was that we have to build in, and I think this is a starting point, we have to build in processes to ensure that we are reaching the Black community, and linking in with Claude and linking in with Henri, and how we build up advisors from the Black community who can be part of our associate team. We're never going to be a big organisation. That's not what we're about. We want to have lots of associate people working on the ground to develop projects. And I want to make sure Breaking Ground is held to account, so that every year we are coming back to show what we're doing and what we're achieving and how we're growing that connection into the community. And obviously linking in with Claude and Henri, will start having some external advisor support to help us do that, but we need to grow that within Liverpool as well. And you know, it's kind of interesting just on a personal level. You know, when was it Henri, I think, was talking about no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. You know, I don't sound it, but I'm originally from Derry. My family's from Derry. I left in 1972 after Bloody Sunday. We all moved out of Derry. My mum and 6 boys moved over to England, and the civil rights movement in Derry is very aligned to the civil rights movement in America, and where, you're right, Claude, community land trusts emerged. So, and I was always attracted to Liverpool. I came here in 1981 when the riots were happening, and I was just attracted. I had to be here, and this city is I've been here ever since. And I think there is a commitment here to do something, but it has to be real. And this is just the starting point of what we hope to achieve.
What I would say to that is, you're right, and if I suppose for me, if that self-build project changed my life. I'd been 8 years unemployed when I went after to try and create that project, and it taught me so much that I felt indebted to the community-led housing fraternity. And that's why, regardless of anything else, I've kept banging the drum, I've kept trying. And I suppose you're right, that video would have just gone missing. It would have just disappeared. It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't be there. And I have some more videos, not of me, but of other projects around the country that would have just gone under the carpet. And what I say to you, Paul, and to all the hubs, right, it is one thing that is missing within the whole community-led housing is evidence, strong evidence about what we do and how we do it, and the impacts we have on real people's lives. So it's important that events like this, the hubs, boot camp, all of these things, that we make sure we save this information. And I hear Peg talking about it all the time, and I think Peg's been a fantastic advocate for community-led houses. The first time I saw her, I think it was down in Leeds markets talking about it, and she's been a massive advocate using her platform. And it's important that we do record this, we keep it, and so that in another 10 years, 20 years, the people know of the hard work that has been put in by individuals like yourself, like Stephen Hill, like Tom Moore, like Steve Hoey, like Rose Forgrove, like Tom Chance. It's important that we make sure it's documented, and never another generation sits down and says we didn't know about it. You know, what Henri was saying is very true. You've got to give people examples of what can be achieved, not hide it from anywhere. But certain people want it hidden because it keeps them doing the same old things. And, you know, we shouldn't have, in modern Britain in 2021, we shouldn't have homeless people on the streets of Britain. We should not. Britain is not a massive country. You know, we shouldn't have people sofa surfing. We shouldn't have people, you know, if you've got in our region something like 120,000 houses to build, there's massive opportunities in creating employment, training, all of that. And I think the community-led housing has to understand, coming out of this COVID, we can be the beating drum for the inequalities, the underrepresented. We can be that beating drum. I've always seen this sector as more than that.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I can see that Grace put a hand up. We are coming towards the end. So Grace, do you want to kind of chip in quickly?
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. Thank you so much for your contributions today. Like, it's been amazing and we've learnt so much. I just wondered if you could say anything more about, I think it was Claude, you mentioned that your schemes you're interested in, how that can include, I think you mentioned like refugees and asylum seekers and undocumented people. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect, because as we know, they're often subject to appalling housing conditions by companies like Serco. And I just wondered if, if you could say a bit more about that, please.
Thanks for that, Grace. What I would say about that is that the community-led housing sector, we can highlight these issues. Is some of the stuff that Henri said as well, in that we can highlight the disenfranchised people that we can be supporting. Yes, homeless people. Yes, disenfranchised migrating people, LGBT people, people with disabilities, the minorities. When we talk about minorities, it's Black and ethnic minorities and those others. So I think the sector needs to be highlighting this and be the champion for changes in that. Do you want to say something, Henri?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, we're doing a study at the moment about homelessness in the BME community, and part of the evidence base that we're gathering identifies unaccompanied asylum seeker children. It talks about asylum seekers and refugees, and the fact that the numbers of people from those groups in terms of homelessness is on the increase. And where I've got a meeting with what's called Strategic Migration Partnership in a couple of weeks' time to look at how we can work with them to provide accommodation solutions. So you're right in what you're saying. Reality, I mean, this is very much about hidden and invisibility, isn't it? Yeah, a lot of what we're talking about is stuff that's hidden and invisible, and it's hidden and invisible because it's not showcased in the media. It's hidden and invisible because it's not really having an impact on public policy, or public policy is determining how effective we can be. But the reality is, the groups you've talked about, there's a massive increase. And if you just look at Eastern Europeans and rough sleepers, right, a massive increase in that respect. But if you then take the BME asylum seekers and refugees, massive increase. Our research to date has shown that there's a massive increase in terms of homelessness across BME population. There's a massive increase in, and we talk about non-statutory homeless and hidden homelessness. I'm not necessarily even just talking about registered homelessness, but even those people that make applications as homelessness or a BME, there's a disproportionate or a disparity in the numbers that are actually accepted as homeless by a local council. There's a disparity in terms of the numbers that are offered social housing. So we've got increasing numbers of people who are homeless, but less numbers that are actually being provided with homelessness support or with social housing. So there are issues there. And the issues that we recognise aren't just in terms of social or economic issues, but there are issues in terms of the way in which councils, fail to record data, okay? So what we're finding is some of the data that we're asking for from them, they've not even actually got, yeah? The other thing that we've acknowledged is that the way in which some of their allocation policies work detrimentally to BME people. When you start looking at figures in terms of people being evicted from social housing, and that raises another question. So when you consider the whole range of housing, we're talking about people who are disenfranchised, people who are disadvantaged already by the system. And these are the people that we, and I say we, I don't mean Pathway Housing Solutions, I'm talking about everybody who's sat here. These are the people that we want to empower. Right? These are people that we want to support. These are people that we want to be part of our collective. Yeah, because these are the people that don't necessarily have the knowledge that we have about the housing market and of the opportunities that are out there. And if sometimes, I was talking to somebody the other day about a film that I watched when I was younger called The Field of Dreams, and it was with Kevin Costner in it. And it's basically about this guy who just went ahead and started something, yeah, and nobody else kind of believed in it. They couldn't see what he saw, they didn't see his vision, but he still went ahead and did it. And for me, part of what you guys are about, breaking ground, is about just starting and doing it, and people will see your vision. People who share your vision will join. So for me, your philosophy, the idea of what you want to achieve is most definitely valuable and will have an impact. And regardless of whether or not it's just Paul Kelly on his own right now, the reality is I think there will be other people that will follow you. And definitely from our perspective, we want to be a supporter of what you're trying to achieve up there.
Yeah,
Wow, what a great
my last point for that, Grace.
Yeah, we really got to finish. So
Grace,
very quickly then, Claude.
let's finish. Grace, I would say that the hubs, all 28 hubs, have a responsibility. Like in Leeds, we're engaging with Leeds Migration Partnership to speak to them. We're engaging with the homeless project, and we're embracing. So I think the hubs can start the discussion and see where that discussion goes. Sorry.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, I think what Henry was saying as well, though, was such a great place to end this on a real note of positivity. And, you know, we know we're starting in a place where we don't want to be now, but you know, a real note of optimism about the fact that we can make the change. And the worst thing would be if in 20 years' time, Claude, you're still sitting having the same conversation still again. Very, very quickly. Some of the key messages that I've picked up from what's gone on in the chat, from what people have said, for breaking ground, very, very quickly. That whole question of strategic buy-in and strategic partners is really, really important. That includes the question of Black civic leadership as well. Who's on the council? What are people doing? Absolutely key. And also other strategic partners like big housing associations. I know there was a conversation about Steve Biko going on in there, you know, what are Homes England doing? How can maybe some of those bigger strategic partners, like Henry was saying, be part of the answer here moving forward? That local connection, though, about local communities and local people really being involved in it is absolutely key. And also that question about the linkage between housing and other anti-poverty initiatives and other initiatives that are going on in the city. I was really struck by the empty homes figures that Henry put up for Liverpool, being, you know, if you looked at them compared to Birmingham, so the size of Liverpool compared to Birmingham, and yet your empty homes figures were really loads higher. And you know, again, that potentially is a real area that you might want to work on. And that also leads us into a bit that came up very early on in the conversation, was about the fact that making sure you recognise that different communities maybe have different housing needs, and that needs to be particularly around 4 or 5 bedroomed houses for extended families, etc. You know, really, really key issue. We don't necessarily just need 1 and 2 bedroom flats for people. So that's a very, very quick whistle stop. I'll send you a photograph of those scribbled notes, Paul. I think there is so much love for what you're doing, Henry and Claude, on the chat here, and for the work that you're doing. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, people are just saying what a great session this has been, and what an inspiration both of you are, and just, you know, the work that you've done. So I think just put your mics on just for the last couple of minutes, you know, last 30 seconds to say goodbye to everyone. Everyone have a really good weekend. I know the festival continues. Tomorrow, is it a day with Granby?
Okay. Homemade.
Sorry, Catherine, sorry. Day with home tomorrow. So yeah, so do that. And then there's another event, I know, on Sunday, and reflections on the festival. Paul, you've done an amazing job. Absolutely amazing job organising. And every session I've been in, Catherine's been in as well. So
my eyes are going funny.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. What a great session. Thank you all. Thank you, Kim, as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
See you later.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.